Hey everyone, Matt from Soundrolling.com here with another sound chat, and I'm talking to Rick Viers today, sound effects and location sound extraordinaire. So, how's it going, Rick?
It's going well.
Good stuff. Well, it's great to have you on board. Just again, a bit of kind of like housekeeping if you're joining us right from the very beginning, which is awesome. There is a comments box, probably this side or this side. And I'm hearing the slight delay that we have in the comments section. Yeah, so Rick, the standard question that everyone gets asked at the very start, how did you get into sound?
I got into sound by complete accident. I went to school, I went to Full Sail University, and I went to write and direct. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I still want to be a filmmaker, but that was my goal, was I wanted to write and direct movies. And I grew up, made movies as a kid. This was back in the day of VHS recorders, so we had like the big handheld cameras that we had to play with, and we had to edit in camera because editing equipment was so expensive. So we would shoot shot for shot in order so that we could just play the movie when we were done. And I was always fascinated by the process. So I went to film school to learn more about it. And one of the things that Full Sail really focused on heavily in the film program was the sound aspect. So for the first 3 months or so, we were just inundated with all this information about sound. We had labs in all of their studios. We learned the recording process. Now, this was back before digital audio. Or digital audio was like coming into play, but we were like, I had a razor blade, I had 2-inch tape, I had to actually, tape the things together and cut and all that stuff, and it was great. I mean, in hindsight, it was like the best way to learn because I knew the old way of doing it, and I really understood the process. I think a little bit more in depth than kind of someone getting into it right now. It's a totally different world, so you kind of understand the mechanics of sound, like quite literally the mechanics of sound. There was gears and motors involved, and tape being pulled, and you had to thread up the reels and all that kind of garbage. And I was fascinated with it because I grew up, I was in bands and stuff like that, so I knew a little bit about sound, but not enough to be dangerous at all. Just I knew enough. And as we got through the program, we finally got into the film side of it, and I was digging that. And then when I graduated, I moved back to Detroit, and I was looking for work, and there wasn't really much, many things available, but I did find out that they were looking for location sound recordists, guys to go out and actually do like the ENG kind of stuff, independent films that were going on in the area, a lot of documentaries and corporate production. And so I said, well, gee whiz, that's not really what I wanted to get into, but I needed to pay the rent, and I knew enough about the whole process from what I had learned at school. At that point, I knew enough to be dangerous. So then I said, I'll give this a shot, and once I've established myself and started paying my bills, then I'll get into writing and directing. Still haven't gotten into the writing and directing. It just kind of took off from there. And to be honest with you, man, I fell in love with it. I was like, this is really cool. I'll never forget the very first time I put on the headphones with the microphone and I'm on set, and it's like, it was just a different experience. I'm like, oh my gosh, this sounds so really, so cool to hear, the voices right inside and nice, right inside your head and all this crystal clear dialogue. And so I just kind of played more and more with sound, and it became a hobby that just kind of turned into a career, I guess.
Fantastic. And you set up in 1998, was it? The Chop Shop.
Yeah, about 98. Yeah.
Yeah, just explain to us about the Chop Shop and how even the name came about, because I'm kind of Detroit Chop Shop. You kind of think Detroit cars, Chop Shop.
Yeah.
They're doing them up. But you're doing it for sound.
They hear the name and they want to know if I'm a chef. Or if I have a salon, or if I work on cars. Yeah, so I came up with the name Chop Shop because I wanted something to kind of describe what I did. And my whole process for sound is, you go out and you gather as much material as possible, and that's all your source material. And then from there, you use your source material to design really cool sounds. And it got to the point where I was just recording so much material that I didn't have time to go in and cut it all up and bring it into a workstation. So I started bringing on people to help me chop up the sounds, and they would throw it on a server, and then I would just grab it off of the server. So it was kind of like, if it was a restaurant, I was like the master chef, and then like all the editors were like the sous chefs that would like prepare the stuff for me to actually make the meal with. And so I said, that's it, we'll call it Detroit Chop Shop. Not even thinking anything about cars, because I'm not a car guy at all. Like I have a hard time like changing a tire on a car. Like that's how horrible I am with vehicles. But the name just kind of stuck, and then we've just been using it ever since.
Fantastic. And so what's your team like in the chop shop? So there's you, and then is it freelance people? Are there some people that are there regularly, or?
We do it seasonally. So I take on a project, and then I'll just chew through the project. I'll bring on people to work with it. At one point, we had a staff of 12 people, and yeah, I'll never do that again ever. I stopped being an artist, and I started being a manager. And I'm dealing with scheduling, and I'm dealing with booking, all this kind of garbage, and then then you have all the your typical HR problems and these challenges. And I got to the point where I was pulling my hair out, and I'm like, man, I'm supposed to be designing sound, and it's like that's the last thing I'm actually doing at the end of the day because I had all this other stuff to do. And so what I just started to do was just bring people on seasonally. So as I get into a project, I'll crew up, and then I'll chew through that. I've got people that I do work with on a regular basis, but I just kind of kept everything freelance. Plus, it also gives the guys that I bring in, it gives them a chance to work on their own projects as well. So it just kind of works out well for everybody.
Fantastic.
At the end of the day, I want to be in this room as much as humanly possible. And so by doing it that way, that keeps me in here, and it keeps me happy.
Fantastic. And then so when you're doing a project, you're being like the supervising sound editor of the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I'm the going back to the chef illustration. I'm the master chef, so everything ends up here, and then I kind of massage and finesse it and master everything that I want. And I do 99.9% of all the design work comes out of me. Comes from me and out of this room, and then from there we just kind of launch the products. So.
Fantastic. And then your recent projects. Tell us a bit more about Aladdin 3477.
Yeah, Aladdin 3477 is it's a science fiction action film by artist Matt Bush, and Matt has done. He's a really, really good friend of mine. He's done huge work. He's a traditional artist, so he actually paints, and so he's done stuff with Lucasfilm, tons of stuff for like Indiana Jones and Star Wars and all these cool things, and he's done stuff with bands like Kiss and Poison and Beastie Boys and all this stuff. And he came up with this idea. I think it's 20 years ago that he came up with this idea. He wrote this script, and it was like, one of these days I'm going to make this movie. And this year happened to be the year that he wanted to make the film. So he came to me back in January and said, look, I'm getting ready to start production. I want you on my team. I said, I'm all in, man. So my official title, actually I don't have an official title. I have many titles, but on set, I'm technically the first AD, but I'm also the location sound recordist, and I'm also gaffing, and I'm also doing all the lighting, and I'm grip, grunt, production assistant. I'm just like everything on the film because it's an independent film. So it's one of those, we don't have clearly defined roles. It's like there's a group of guys, and we're all in it to win it, and just everybody pitches in, and we do what we have to do to get the film shot. And then once it hits post-production, I'm going to be the sound designer for the film. So I'm going to be handling everything from all of the dialogue and ADR work that needs to get done, all the Foley and sound design for the spaceships and vehicles and all the cool effects that need to be put in. So, which puts me in a position where I can't complain about the dialogue because I was the one who recorded it. So that'll be kind of fun to experience, going through all the stuff that we recorded, because there's been a lot of challenges that we've experienced on set. It's a low budget film, and he's funding it himself. So this is all coming out of his pocket. And so he rented a warehouse that we're using as a soundstage, and we've done the best we could to kind of tame the room. So we got like sound blankets. I can't remember how many sound blankets we have, but the whole place is just littered with sound blankets, like all the ceiling and the walls and all that kind of stuff. But it's not soundproof at all. So we've got neighbors that have factories and machines, and so what we're running into is we have this constant drone of machines in the background from our neighbors so anything we shoot on the soundstage, more than likely we're going to have to replace with ADR. And so this is one of those films where the stuff that we shoot on location actually sounds better than the stuff we're shooting on the sound stage. Stuff on the sound stage I'm going to have to go in and tweak and fix and replace, but the stuff that we shoot on location is probably going to be, you know, perfect right out of the box. So we'll see how that goes.
Fantastic. And so how long did you kind of get a pre-production time for? Because obviously being both on the kind of production side and on the post-production side, you probably had a pretty early kind of bird's eye view of what everything was going to kind of look like.
Like I said, we started in January, and so we had about 5 months of lead time because we didn't shoot. I can't remember the date. I think it was May 18th. I remember it was the first day of Star Wars, Episode 7. We had ended up shooting that same day. Was our first day, so it was pretty exciting.
Nice.
One then a better movie.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
And so, what kind of problems were you kind of seeing on set? Because a lot of people, like me included, like starting off and going back to doing kind of like passion projects where you're kind of digging in all the time. Was there kind of a lot of discussion about obviously the kind of sound issues that you might run into, and kind of how did you have those discussions early on?
You know, it all came down to budget. Budget was king. So I would, as best I could, I would pitch him ideas like, hey, we should try to do this and we try to do that, and it all came down to, you know, he trusts my, you know, my opinion, and he certainly respects it. But at the end of the day, it came down to, well, that's great, Rick, but we only have this money to do this. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm in it to win it. So we had to work around all those kind of issues and problems as best we could. Yeah, I mean, Matt's an artist, and I mean, he's an artist. So you give him like simple things. He's like MacGyver. So you give him like little plastic parts and shipping containers and all these things, and he would make robots out of them. You know, and some of the robots are fairly large, huge, giant machines and things that he's creating, and puppets, you know, that take multiple people to operate, and servo motors and all that kind of stuff. All that stuff is noise because it's all made out of plastic, or it's, you know, anything that, you know, any type of movement that was happening was registering on the mics. And I told him out of the, you know, right off the drop, I'm like, man, this looks great, but it's going to sound like somebody's moving a bunch of, you know, like a bin of plastic the entire time. So we tried to work around it as best we can, but at the end of the day, it was image first, sound second, just because that's what the budget dictated. And, you know, I'm not horribly worried about it because, you know, I kind of know what I'm doing, so I'm pretty sure I can fix most of this stuff. But it's not going to be easy. There's definitely going to be a lot of challenges, and so I think we're going to see a heavy amount of ADR, you know, in the film. So, but you know, that's all. Yeah.
Well, how many kind of principal kind of actors are there that are going to be kind of in the film?
There is, unfortunately, there's a team of people that Aladdin kind of recruits to help him on his quest, and so I would say maybe 10 to 12 main kind of the group, I guess, that he works with throughout the film. Essentially, there's 3 or 4 main key, you know, principal actors, but there's a big support group. So there's a lot of dialogue that we're going to have to clean up. So.
Fair enough. And have you approached kind of ADR in the past, and kind of how have you kind of tackled kind of dicing up and queuing sessions and things like that?
I'm a big fan of, when I do ADR, I like to go with the exact same mic that was used. You know what I mean? I don't try to go for a better sounding mic. I go for whatever mic was, especially if I'm punching it into lines that we're using or recorded with another mic. So I want everything to be as flawless as possible. And same thing, distance. You know, it'll help with me because I remember being on set and we've got tons of, you know, behind the scenes, you know, footage and pics and stuff. So I try to approximate microphone distance, mic types, and all that kind of stuff to, as best I can, make it match that environment, so that the dialogue is a little bit, I guess, flows more flawlessly, I guess.
Yeah, I guess, and then you can. A lot of people, I suppose, always, because then they have the kind of ability to get really close to a person in ADR, they're probably really tempted to just automatically do that. But I guess when you open it up, that's when you get actually the kind of feel of the room. But is there kind of I guess, is there kind of like are you just trying to find a sweet spot where obviously you're not really hearing the room because the room might be a different size?
Mm-hmm. I try to match distance as best as possible. It's tempting, especially when you're when you're recording ADR in a studio. You can get that mic nice and tight, and you can get beautiful, great dialogue. To me, beautiful, great dialogue is different when I'm trying to match the other dialogue. So if the other dialogue was a little more distant, I want my mic to be distant in ADR because I don't want. As a kid, growing up watching movies, I could tell which lines were ADR'd. And I had no idea what ADR was. It was just that moment where you're watching a show and all of a sudden, somebody's voice is like right in your face, and then the next line is, and I didn't know what it was technically. I was just like, that didn't sound right. And so my goal is that nobody notices that, hey, what was that? How come all of a sudden it's the voice of God in my face when everybody else sounds like they're 3 feet away? And so once I started learning more about sound, I was like, okay, I've got to figure out a way so that somebody else that's watching the stuff that I'm working on is not going to say, hey, that doesn't sound right. I want it to be seamless. I want it to just sound like everything was recorded on set at one given time. So.
And what kind of plugins and things are you using to help create that?
I like Altiverb a lot. Altiverb definitely helps you place things where they need to be. But then I'll use if I need any kind of verb, I'll just play with it. If I'm not finding what I'm looking for in Altiverb, which is kind of hard because there's so many presets and then user presets as well. People that are going out and shooting, impulse responses in all sorts of environments. So it's like the world's your oyster when it comes to that plugin. But I might just, grab something, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, like Isotope or something like that, and then just kind of dial it in. So I don't I default to certain plugins, but I don't dismiss other plugins. I'll keep playing with something until I get what I'm looking for. So I listen with my ears and not with my eyes. So if it doesn't sound right, I'm like, all right, I got to find something else, and I'll tweak it until I get what I'm looking for. So
it's a really interesting thing about the impulse responses, and lots of people in previous chats as well have kind of just commented on how much are kind of impulse responses used. Are you finding that you're using them quite a lot for just being able to place not just dialogue but also effects?
Well, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Because again, it's the same concept. If I'm in a warehouse and all the dialogue sounds like it's in a warehouse, and then I'm doing Foley, well, I'm going to want that Foley to sound like it's also in that warehouse. So I like for everything to just sound like it's seamlessly in one place.
Yes, and so do you, for instance, so when you're on location, you're also using radio mics as well as a boom? And are you kind of mimicking that in ADR as well? So are you miking them with a radio if you're using a radio in that take?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And I've done that before. And it's not even a matter of using the same lav mic. I'll actually use, if I ended up using a wireless, I'll run it through the same transmitter and receiver because that will color the sound as well. And so it's kind of weird because you're in a studio and you can easily hardwire and do it like the normal way, but it's like that's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is match exactly what I recorded in the exact same way that I recorded it. So yeah, we'll pull out a wireless unit and same lav and record the ADR that way as well. Yeah, I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but that's how I do it. So
yeah. Well, it's all about matching. It all makes perfect sense to me. But I guess the kind of trickiest thing, the hardest thing to kind of pin down in terms of continuity is the performance. Are you having any kind of input on the performance apart from kind of the nod or the shake that comes from a performance that the director likes or thinks is not very good?
It depends. The majority of the time, I end up helping direct performance as well. It really depends on the director. Some directors are hands off. They're like, nope, this is exactly what. They're hands-on, so they're like, no, I want it to be exactly this way, and you kind of get a feel for it at the beginning of the session. You can see who's who's steering the ship, and I don't want to step on anybody's toes. It's not my project; it's their project, and I'm there to serve them. And if that's what they want to do, okay, that's fine. But I'll be honest with you, man. I would say the vast majority of people that I've worked with tend to just say, okay, Rick, you know what you're doing. Unless there's something I really, really don't like, I'm just going to let you kind of handle this. But the direction certainly comes from the director or the producer or whoever's running it. But if I hear something, I'm like, that's not selling it for me, or the beat is off, or whatever. The majority of the time they listen to it, and then we'll do alternate takes. You know, they're like, well, I disagree with you, Rick, but let's shoot that anyways. Let's record that anyways, and then, you know, we can figure it out after the fact.
Yeah, choose it on the stage when you've got the picture and everything else.
I'm a huge fan of doing alternates, especially like when you got multiple opinions, even on set, even when it's just shots that we're doing. If somebody's got a good idea and the director's kind of on the fence, I just look at them, I'm like, shoot it both ways. You know, if we've got time to do it, you know, and then we can always make that decision after the fact. And we've done it. We make bets on set. So we'll be on a location like on the other side of the state where we're never going to go back to that location. And someone will say, well, the action should come from screen left. And, you know, and the other half of the group is like, no, it should come from screen right. And then we're trying to figure it out. I just look at Matt. I'm like, let's shoot it both ways. My bet is it's going to be this one, and then Matt will bet on this one. And then whichever one we use, we end up paying up whatever it is, you know, night out, dinner, whatever it is we're betting. So it's great because when we're watching the dailies, everybody's like on the, you know, edge of their seat to see which spot was used, and then you can hear everybody going, yay! And, you know, whoever won the decision. But to me, it's like, especially with digital, it doesn't cost anything. Unless you're like really on a time crunch or you're limited, why not shoot it both ways and just figure it out after the fact? You know, so.
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting about the ADR thing, but I'm really interested in your thoughts on getting into those sound effects, because it sounds like if there's robots, and I'm picturing Aladdin, I'm picturing 12, I'm not really picturing, robots. That's really interesting. What else did you have to kind of create and things?
The film is kind of like, it's the story of Aladdin meets Star Wars meets The Matrix. So he definitely has a spin on what he's doing. So it's not your traditional Aladdin film. It takes place roughly 1,500 years in the future, in the year 3477. And, I mean, everything is spaceships, man. Everything is... there is a... I don't want to give away too much about the film, so I have to be careful on how I word my answers. But there's a cyber world that's involved, and that's probably all I want to say.
Yeah.
So we've got effects for that, and then we got spaceships. The Abu character, which was the little monkey in the Disney one, well, that's a robot now, named Fiji. And so Fiji is kind of like he's like a flying version of R2-D2. So he's got a little bit of personality and stuff, and Aladdin plays off of him, and there's definitely some humor that comes out of that. So I've got to design all of that stuff. So I've got to design not only the robot's movements, but vocalizations, and he's got to have character, and so that's going to be interesting. I'm going to have to channel my inner Ben Burt to see if I can. I don't know that I'm going to be able to live up to Ben, but we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've always wondered as well about the concept of when you're doing sound design, when you're trying to come up with effects, and the VFX and things are probably not finished for a good while, and kind of understandably so, especially if it's sci-fi and things like that. Where are you kind of drawing your references from in terms of how things should sound? Because in the future, obviously, there are no kind of direct references. So are you just kind of building an outward picture, and then that leads to a logical conclusion, or are you kind of just starting off with one idea and just building it out?
I haven't really started on the sound design aspect of the film yet. I haven't recorded anything for the sound effects yet. We probably, to be honest with you, it's probably going to be another year before I even start the sound design, because we're still in production, and that's going to trail off well into, I would think, I'm hoping to wrap by summer. End of summer, but we'll see how it goes. Until then, I'm definitely, my gears are spinning. I'm constantly kind of thinking about what I'm going to do. The great thing about Matt is he's an artist, and so I don't even know, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of paintings and storyboards, and there are really intricate, drawings and paintings that he's like, this is exactly how I want it to look like. And it's great because he showed me some of this stuff a couple of years ago, and he's like, we're going to do a film eventually, and it's going to be this, and he shows me the paintings, and now it's so weird because, a couple of years later, we're watching the dailies, and I'm like, oh my God, it looks just like the painting. How did you do that? And so I definitely have an idea of how the visual effects are going to play out. The challenges, not really the challenges, the variables that I'm going to have to worry about is speed, intensity, direction, all these sorts of things, but I know what they're going to look like. I just don't know how fast they're going to be moving, or things like that. So I'll have to wait till I get some footage to kind of dial it in. But until then, I can actually start playing with, okay, I think it's going to sound something like this, and then use that as my starting point and actually start matching to picture after the fact.
And then build it up. Brilliant. Are you thinking of, because obviously even spaceships, they're kind of entities in themselves. They're kind of, do you treat them almost as kind of mini characters and give them some sort of like, well, this spaceship would blatantly be broken down in this area and that area, just to make it more dynamic?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lived-in world, so it's got like that New Hope kind of feel. Not everything is new and shiny. Everything's kind of banged up and been used. And there's a couple of hero vehicles. For example, Aladdin, he has a sky sail, which is kind of like it's kind of like the what are the things you surf on it, like the surfboard with a little
wind.
Wind sail, or I don't know what it's called, but
yeah, windsurfing.
Like the skiff used in Return of the Jedi. So there's like multiple people can be on it, and it actually flies and moves up and down and all that kind of stuff. So that's got to have a unique character voice to it, because that's kind of like his ship. There's other things that'll just be miscellaneous, like ships flying in the background. Those things we won't focus too much on in terms of character. We want them to sound cool and unique and something definitely different. But it's I think the sky sail is going to be the one that I'm going to really want to dial in, because that's kind of like his main vehicle. Yeah.
And so when you have kind of the hero vehicles or the kind of hero elements where it's kind of sound effects intense, are you trying to give them? Can you give them like a range of emotion as well? I want to know just how far you're kind of taking the kind of character aspect of the ship.
I think absolutely. I think for things like startups, takeoffs, landings, shutoffs, I think that's where really and then revs. So I think those are really going to show the emotion. I think when the constant drone of it flying is not going to really sell a whole lot of character. There'll be some elements where it'll be very unique, but I think where it's when it flies away really fast, or when it approaches, or when it turns off or starts up, I think that's where we're going to really kind of focus on giving it more character, and more of a personality. Yeah.
And you must have built up a magnificent sound library already. I mean, there's lots of other videos of you on YouTube and things going around with your crew recording all sorts of random effects. I mean, how much are you kind of previously using from your own library and kind of getting from other people?
For Aladdin, I want to do everything original from scratch. I don't want to use anything. I mean, I don't even know how many sounds I've got now on the servers. It's over 1 million sounds that we have. I don't want to use any of them. I want to create something new and from scratch and make it a really kind of fresh soundtrack. Which it'll be fun. I mean, I know what I'm doing, so I know how to go out and record it, but I don't want to use stuff I've already done. I want to create. There's a couple of synths that I'm looking at getting that just have like a really cool, and it's something I haven't used before, so there's going to be a learning curve, but in the learning curve comes all the experimenting. Because it's like once you know a piece of gear, you tend to default to using the same presets or the same, because we're human beings. We're creatures of habit. When you go to the store or to the mall or to the movie theater, you more than likely will sit in the same seating area. You'll more than likely park in the same area. We like safety. We like doing the way things the way we've always done it. And that's how I am with plugins. I'm no different, man. I go to a plugin, I'm like, all right, I'm going to this preset, or I'm going to turn it to this, and I'm done. When I get into something I don't know what I'm doing, then I'm gonna tweak it to death and play with every knob and just kind of figure it out. And I think that's where I'm gonna get a lot of the really, really cool and unique sounds for this film, because I'm gonna try stuff I've never done before, use equipment I haven't used before, software, whatever. So yeah, there's a vehicle. I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, because there's some pauses in the film, but there's a 57 Chevy that they retrofit into a spaceship, and the car by itself, it's got a really cool sound to it. It's got that that purring engine, that just kind of guttural. So I'm going to use that for the sound source for the vehicle, but then I've got to kind of take it and add something to it that makes it sound futuristic and kind of spacey, and turbine jets or whatever it is I decide to use for it. So it'll be there's definitely some cool things for me to work on.
Yeah, fantastic. And taking the kind of uh, the route of trying something new, is that something that you're always trying to get kind of new external kind of input into your kind of processes? Are you like talking to other people, or how are your kind of external kind of chances to test new things coming to you?
I don't understand that question.
Sorry, it was a very, very wordy question. It was just because, again, creatures of habit and defaulting to the same type of things. Are you always trying on even a project where you've essentially like made the same effects before? You're always trying to find slightly new ways of doing it?
Yes. Yeah. I did that. I've gotten to the point now where I've done so many sound effect libraries that I caught myself, and this happened a while ago, man, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. I had to do, I can't remember what the library was. It was maybe a Crash library or something. And I remember saying to myself, oh, Crash library. So I go to Home Depot and I buy all this material that I'm going to use to smash, and I bring it in here and I record it this way, and I mic it this way, and blah, 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 and I perform it this way. And I remember thinking to myself, well, this is stupid. I'm like, I've already done this before. I've done it this exact same way. Why am I re-recording all this stuff to get the exact same thing that I've already done in another library? And that's when it really hit me. I'm like, okay, I've got to step up my game a little bit because I'm getting lazy. And so that's when I started saying, okay, I want new mics, or I want to, if I'm using the same mics, I might try different mic positions, different source material. So like I always use this wood paneling because it really splinters and gives me a great sound. Okay, great. Well, I've already recorded that a bunch of times. Now I got to go out and find another piece or something else I haven't recorded. So it was about 8 years ago when I said, okay, every time I do a project, if I've done something similar before, I'm not allowed to do it the same way. It's just kind of like one of those things. I made a rule. Okay, I'm not going to do it this way again. And it just keeps it fresh and fun for me because I want to be entertained while I'm doing it because I'm doing it to have fun. And I also want to have like really cool and unique sounds that I haven't done before. Because what's the purpose of me recording something I've already recorded? If you just go out and buy the other one, you don't need to use this one. So plugins, different types of synths or other kind of gear that I can get into that I haven't used before. And then once like for example, I was talking to a buddy of mine, Jeff Rabrovich of Go Synthesis. In fact, we had this conversation yesterday. I found a really cool synth that I want to use, and he was asking me some questions about it, and I just told him, I said, look, I'm going to buy this synth, and I'm going to drain this synth for maybe 3 to 6 months, and I'm going to have a lot of fun with this synth. But once I'm done after that, 3 to 6 months, I'm going to sell it because I don't want to go back to it anymore because I've already used it, and I've already had all the fun that I can have out of it. To keep using it, I'm just going to keep getting the same sounds, and I don't want to do that. So I'll buy, a plug-in or, anything like that, and I'll use it to death for a while, and then I'll pitch it. And then I'll just say, all right, I'm not using it anymore. I want to go to something else. Because if not, again, creatures of habit, and we get lazy and we just kind of default to what we already know. So, and I got to practice what I preach because I still have a tendency to default to things, especially if I'm in a hurry. I'm like, oh, screw it, I'll just do this again, And I have to force myself to say, nope, I have to move forward. I got to try something different and blaze a different trail. So.
And the other interesting aspect I'm always fascinated in is like people developing their own style. Because again, if we're all constantly trying to kind of push and do kind of new things, there are certain strings of kind of threads that kind of go through our work. I kind of feel just naturally. I mean, no, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to try and phrase my question so it makes sense. How do you maintain your style while getting new input?
I try to limit my exposure to what everybody else is doing, which is challenging because I'm a movie nut, I'm a TV nut, I'm a video game nut, so I'm always playing that stuff. And my answer is somewhat hypocritical. It's like a double standard because the reality is when I'm going to do a sci-fi project or whatever, I'll start watching sci-fi movies or playing sci-fi video games. And it's not necessarily because I want to emulate those kinds of sounds, although that does happen where I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I want to try something like that. But it's more like it's inspiration, right? I make the best, sounds that when I'm excited about doing it. then I'm like, oh man, I want to do this, you know. And so, but at the same time, I don't want to make the exact same kinds of sounds. I just want to make something from that world. So it's I guess what I'm trying to say is I limit my exposure by not getting into it too much, but at the same time, here's a better way of putting it. I research up until I start the project. Once I start the project, I'm done. Because once I'm in the middle of production, then I don't want to be tainted by everybody else's ideas. And it's hard. I mean, there's no real... And I cheat, just like everybody else. I get lazy, and I'm like, oh, I got it. That's an awesome sound. I want to make something like that. But at the same time, it's got to be mine, so I have to do it my way. And I don't know if that's a good answer.
No, it's a really good answer. It's just because I'm constantly interested in how sound designers are they're kind of just bringing their own they're obviously just bringing their own touch to kind of sound effects and sound design in their process of how they come up with the characters and work with the directors and stuff. But it is interesting just how much kind of external influence kind of just goes on and how people kind of manage that so they're not just kind of keeping up with the same craze that's going on. Like as soon as Inception goes out, then everything whoop and all that kind of jazz.
I hear it all the time, and it bothers me because, like Transformers, you know, they started doing all that glitchy stuff. You know, it's like dubstep robots. So when the first one came out, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This hasn't been done before. And then for like years after that, it's like what everybody was doing. I'm like, oh, come on, man. It's like, yes, it was cool, but now it's like beaten to death. It's like dubstep, for example. You know, you had a lot of dubstep. The trailer beds were all dubstep. Before then, I think everything was big hits, you know, and all this craziness. Then it went into dubstep. And now trap is becoming like the new thing. It's like, okay, guys, it's cool when somebody does it, but then why do we all have to do the same thing? Can't we just appreciate somebody's work and go, that was awesome, and then just keep with your own kind of style versus that was awesome, therefore if I want to be awesome, I have to do it that way. No. You be awesome in your own way. And it's like, for example, we did the Countdown to the Apocalypse sound design competition a couple of months ago, and when I do sound design competitions and when I judge them, I'm telling you, it's always the exact same thing. You have like 90% of all the entries sound identical. Mm-hmm. And then you only have like the top 10% where people have actually kind of thought outside of the box. So from a judging standpoint, it's pretty easy because if you get like, you know, 100 entries, you can pretty much throw out 90 of them right off the top because they all sound the same. Well, how do you judge it? They all sound the same, so you got to go for the unique and the cool. So then you get down to, okay, now these are the ones we need to focus on. These are really cool and unique, and then that's where it becomes, okay, which one was the best? I don't know, and then you got to kind of play with it that way. So, but like for example, when we were working on Zombie Apocalypse, we watched a bunch of zombie stuff leading up to the project. But I didn't watch like The Walking Dead. I didn't even know about that show until like I was almost done because I think it was in season 2 or they were starting season 2. I can't remember when it was, but I didn't even know about that show until we were already in post-production on zombies, on Zombie Apocalypse, and so that was cool because then I knew that the things that I were creating for the library wasn't influenced by that show. It's not a Walking Dead library. I had made the library before I started watching Walking Dead. Then, of course, as soon as I found out about Walking Dead, I like binge-watched it on Netflix and just like instantly caught up and became a fan. And what was cool is because when Zombie Apocalypse came out, I think it was the following year, we started to hear some of the sounds in the show. And I'm like, oh, that is so awesome, you know. So
nice. That's really cool. The kind of process of building libraries as well. Just, I mean, is there kind of a standard that you're going for in terms of numbers? I mean, when you say like a crash library, I mean that could go on forever. Is there any sort of process of just being able to finish a library?
No, I mean every library is different. I usually come up with a goal, and then I try to reach that goal. But I don't push for the goal if it doesn't naturally fit the goal. So, for example, let's say I wanted to make a crash library and I wanted to have 1,000 sounds in it. Well, if I get to like 600, 700 sounds, and then I'm kind of spinning my wheels, and then I'm like, okay, I got to make extra sounds to make that goal, but I'm like, I really kind of exhausted it, and I'm kind of losing my passion for it because it's like I've done this, you know, so many 600 other times in the library. then I'll just say, well, forget it. Then we'll whittle it down to the best 500, and then that'll be the library. So, and what's great is because Blast Wave Effects is my company, so I can do anything I want. So I don't have to answer to anybody and go, nope, I got to create another 300 or 400 sounds. I get to a point where I'm like, no, this is really cool. This is what it needs to be. If I come up with better ideas later or other ideas, then I'll make a second version of the library and update the library that way. But I usually do it until I'm like, okay, this feels good. This works for me. But at the same time, like for Heroes and Villains, I knew I wanted 1,000. I think we did 1,001 sounds for that. So we ended up creating 3,500 sounds. And for that, really, my goal was I wanted to have like I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was a 2-to-1 ratio. So I'm like, all right, I want to create 2,000 sounds. And then we'll throw out 1,000 and get to like the best 1,000. But that one was so much fun. We just kept making stuff. I was like, oh, this is awesome. And I got up to about 3,500 sounds, and I'm like, okay, we got to land the plane because this is going to go on forever. And so we literally just took 2,500 sounds and just kind of said, nope, we're not going to use these. We'll focus on these 1,001, and that's what ended up coming into the library. So.
And are you kind of, because people that kind of want to, let's say, make their own library, I mean, there must be categories that are kind of too broad to possibly make an effective library, and then there's categories that are so small that your library is like, I don't know, one sort of model of tap or something like that, and obviously that's way too small. So are you within a library like Crashes just focusing on like auto crashes, and then you're just focusing on wood crashes? Or is it kind of a mixture?
Really, I think it's anything. It's anything goes. You've got there's a couple of companies that make like the big general libraries. So I've got like Blast Wave Effects. We have Sonopedia. Pro Sound Effects has the hybrid library, which actually has some of Blast Wave stuff in it. But it's also got like Foundation Library and some other cool libraries in there. So you've got like a really kind of general range of anything from a toilet flush to a machine gun to a spaceship, like all that kind of stuff. And then you got like the niche libraries, which are becoming more and more popular because everybody and their brother can make sound effect libraries now. And so everybody's out and doing their style, which I think is amazing. I think it's awesome because, before there was only a handful of libraries that you could choose from. And now it's like the world's your oyster. You've got like everybody and their brother's got these micro libraries coming up. And so I said all that to say this: if you're going to make a crash library, make a crash library. If you're like, I only want to focus on glass, then focus on glass. There's no wrong way to do it. But if you're going to make a crash library, don't overextend yourself. You know what I mean? Focus on what you're comfortable with, and then even if it's a small library, make a small library. You can always make more libraries. You're not going to be, your career doesn't end with that one library. There's plenty of other things to do. General libraries, those are challenging. Because there's like, in order to have a solid general library, you've got to cover a lot of bases. You've got to have, helicopters, and you've got to have, cars, and then you got to have trains, you got to have boats, and you got toilet flushes, and then you got to have people laughing and farting and burping, and you got like everything. So that those take years to create. But and then you got like micro libraries, like somebody's got like servo motors, and they'll do like 10 or 20 different types of servo motors, and they'll do like multiple versions of each one. They release a library of a few hundred sounds, and it's cool. Somebody just came out with a balloon library. It's like balloons popping and stretching, and it's like, yeah, are they going to make millions of dollars off of that library? No, but I guarantee you there's people that are like, man, I really need some good balloon sounds. And it's like, if they can access that, there you go. And so, I don't know, I guess that's a long-winded answer to say, do what you're comfortable with. Do what makes you smile. If the moment the smile starts to leave your face in the project, that's when it's time to land the plane. That's when it's time to say, okay, I've done enough. Let's just release this as it is, and then work on something else. Because at the end of the day, it's art, and you should be having fun. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. It's just really always fascinated me about people that kind of go out and just say, I'm going to create a library, and kind of what that kind of entails. I mean, for you, for instance, when you're recording something, do you kind of have are you using the same microphones all the way through, for instance, or are you literally just focused on, I'm recording this sound and this microphone is going to make it sound amazing?
It depends on if I'm in Foley or if I'm in the field. In the field, I'm almost always using shotguns. almost always. But I do bring other mics. I bring in, large diaphragms. If I'm going to be outdoors, it's almost always a shotgun or a stereo mic, depending on the sound. But if I'm indoors or if I'm in Foley, that's when I'm like, okay, I'll break out a whole bunch of different kinds of mics and I can play with it. But if I'm going to be outdoors, it's going to be a shotgun mic. Almost 90% of the time, that's pretty much my default. So, some guys swear by different mic types. Oh, you got to have this kind of mic for this, and you get this kind of mic for this. And there's truth to that, yes. But to me, it's mic positioning. You know what I mean? I'd rather, move the mic around and find interesting ways to record the sound versus I got to go out and get a different mic for this every time. I don't know about that, because to me, it's about. To me, the recording process is about getting source material so I can be in here making cool stuff. So I'm all about just gathering super clean, isolated sounds that I know I can bring in here and then tweak to death. So I don't even know how many mics we've got now, like 150 something microphones. But I tend to default to using the same, handful because I know they work, I know exactly how they work, and I love the sound they're giving to me. So I just kind of stick with what I know. Yeah.
Well, tried and true is definitely a way forward, especially if if you just want it clean, if you just want to, get it back so you can then play with it and then have all your experimentation, I guess.
I can't tell you how many times I've said to myself, I keep using the same mics. I should probably go out and get different types of mics, and I do that. And once every year or every couple of years, I'll be like, all right, I gotta go get mics. And I go out and I get mics, and then I do like a whole day in session, and then I listen to them like, yeah, but I really like the mics I was using before. That happens to me all the time, and I get burned on it. And then every now and then I do find a new mic where I'm like, okay, that is cool. I really like that mic, and I might kind of use that a little bit more often. But at the end of the day, I'm kind of sticking with what I really, really like, and those are the mics I end up using. Yeah.
And are you finding that now we've kind of reached the standard in terms of microphones, in a way, in terms of the technology now, again, going kind of like all digital and things like that, that now the changes are so kind of small, if there's any slight advantage, that it's actually becoming just more specialized to certain situations. And so generally, a normal shotgun mic is going to do you for pretty much like 95%, 98% of your libraries.
Yeah, I think we've reached a point in the industry where if your sounds aren't clean when you recorded them, it's your own fault. You know what I mean? Because it's like the reality is I can go to Best Buy right now and with a few $100 and I can get decent enough, like a handheld recorder or something, and go out and record really decent kinds of sounds. I mean, it's not going to perform nearly as well as the higher end stuff, but I can still get super clean sound with that. When I first started, you needed 10 grand to get into a good kit, or at least 5 or 6 grand to get into a decent kit. Nowadays, you can do it for a few $100s, especially if you're just starting off. Go get a Zoom recorder, or go get like a Tascam DR40 or something like that, and just start experimenting. And then just because the reality of it is this stuff is getting really, really clean, and it's like even the lower end stuff is really decent sounding nowadays. So I guess I said all that to say there's no excuse to not have clean, good sound. It's all about technique. Technique always trumps technology.
Very, very useful. Yes, exactly. And the other part, apart from sort of no noises, obviously, are you doing all your stuff in higher sample rates?
I record at 2496. I think pretty soon I might look into jumping up. But to me, 24-bit 96K, I'm really happy with that stuff. To be honest with you, if you played me a sound effect that was at 2496 and then a sound effect at 2448, and you put a shotgun to my head and said which one was which, boom! I don't know. I think the higher sample rates for me really come into play when I start to slow it down. When I start getting into pitch shifting or plugins, that's why the 96 comes. That's where it comes in. And I might, like I said, I'm gonna probably get into higher rates here pretty soon. But then you got all the storage space and to deal with, and the processing and all that kind of garbage. So it's like unless I'm really, 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 really gonna notice the difference, right now I'm happy with 2496.
I guess as well, we're still just talking about these last few tiny percentage points in the kind of digital world of maximizing everything.
Yeah.
But in terms of obviously when you go out and doing a recording session, obviously you've got thousands of libraries, millions of sound effects, Nelly. I mean, how do you keep track of them all? You must have your labeling system down to an absolute T.
Yeah, pretty much. SoundMiner. SoundMiner. Man, that's my tool. I go for that. That thing is, it works very well. And you've got so many different tagging options and fields and things that you can use that I open that thing up and I can find anything in my library instantaneously. Yeah. So, and then there's a lot of toys and things that you can do, like previewing and all that kind of stuff. And you can do pitch shifting in real time as you're previewing it. Like, oh, what would that sound like pitch down? You don't have to drag it in your workstation. You can just do it right there in the app. So SoundMiner is it for me. Yeah, that's definitely the way to go. But cataloging your sounds is so huge. It's so big. You have to tag everything because your libraries grow faster than you realize they're going to grow. You get to a point where it's like, if you don't do it from the get-go, you're going to wake up one day with 30,000 sounds, and then you realize it's going to take you 6 months to catalog all that stuff. So I catalog as I go.
And are you finding that you're finding new sound effects again that, for instance, you did like 8-9 years ago, and suddenly you come across it again and go, oh, well, it needs this tag. I've been looking for this for ages. Do you find that since your library is like phenomenal?
Well, actually, I do go back and clean up metadata. In fact, we're getting ready to do that with Blast Wave Effects. I'm going to go through the entire library and just re-tag everything. Wow. And it's going to take me a very long time. This thing will be gray by the time I'm finished. But yeah, I think it's important to go back and kind of revisit and re-tag things like that. If there's holes. But for me, the Blast Wave library is so big that, and things have changed in the industry since we started the library. And so I want to try to keep it fresh and current. And, the reality of it is there's really no standard in the industry. It's kind of like, it's from studio to studio. Everybody has their own kind of different ways of doing it. So, and same thing with us. And so as we got into it years and years, I'm like, we should start labeling it this instead of that. Instead of using this word, we should use that word. And so, and we started releasing new products with different tags. Well, now what happens is those tags don't match the tags from the tags that we used years earlier. And we want to make it more easy for the end user to go through and find the stuff and have it all appear at the same place and all with the same tags in the same field. So we're going to go back and clean all that stuff up.
And do you recommend things like tagging from a production that you worked on, or tagging for a library that it went into already?
Yes, I do that. Yeah, absolutely. I have different fields for, okay, this appears in this library. Or I created codes. So, for example, Blast Wave Imaging Elements, which was the first library we did, is BWIE. And then I have like a list of the codes. It's real simple coding, but when I bring, I just wanted to interject this. I meant to say this a few minutes ago, but when I'm designing sounds or editing sounds, when I'm naming the file, that's really when I start tagging it. So I don't actually bring it into SoundMiner and embed the metadata. I actually name the file with the metadata I want to use into it. So, for example, let's say it's a car crash in a junkyard, glass hit, all those things. I will actually put those keywords in the name of the file. And then when I go to do the metadata, I'm like, okay, there's my starting point. This is everything I need to know about what that sound was, and then I'll use that to create the metadata from that. Because if not, like, for example, Heroes and Villains, we had 3,500 sounds. Dude, I don't care how good you are. You're not going to remember every single one of those sounds, or where did I get that from, and what was that, or what was the, I don't know. So if I don't name everything in the file from the, as soon as I'm saving it, I'll forget all of that stuff. So, and I don't want to sit there. I'm about making noise. I'm not about cataloging. You know what I mean? I don't want to sit there and like I make a sound. Let me get out my Excel database and start typing in and da da da. No, I'm like, I made that sound. That's cool. I want to start making the next sound. So I just name the file with all the information I can, save it, boom, now I'm on to the next sound. And then what I do is I'll build up all of this stuff, and then when I get to the end of it, when I'm mastering a library, that's when Pandora or Spotify hits up. I listen to music and I sit there, and now I'm doing all the database entry, and I'll do that for days or weeks on end. Yeah. which is great because it's the only time I get to work and listen to music.
Yeah, that's always really the downside.
I envy graphic designers, man. Those guys get to sit around and listen to music all stinking day long. Me, I can't have any music playing because I'm using my ears. So when I get into the cataloging end of it, that's when I get to finally listen to music. So.
Gotcha. Well, I think that's been a roundabout tour into a little life into Rick Viers, which is fantastic. So I just want to thank all the people that have been watching. I want to thank you as well, Rick. And I'll kind of leave you with any other final words for our viewers?
Make some noise, man. Just do something. If you really like to do it, just keep doing it. Don't worry about how much gear you have, or don't worry if your stuff is going to sound as good as the next guy and all that kind of garbage. If you really love what you're doing, just keep doing it. You will get better, and you're going to dial in your own style. But just to keep playing and keep experimenting. There are no rules. There's no right way to do it other than just doing it.
Fantastic. Couldn't have been said better, I don't think. So that's goodbye from me. We'll have a little chat off air, but if you say goodbye to the folks as well, and then we'll, continue afterwards. So goodbye from me.
See you guys.